こんにちは。私は大阪府立吹田国際中学校高等学校の校長を務めます太田康介です。本校吹田国際では他の府立学校と同様に優れた教育とその機会を生徒に提供する責任があります。さらに私たちは先進的な取り組み、実践に関する情報を大阪府の教員コミュニティ全体と共有する義務があります。この研修ビデオの内容がお役に立てば幸いです。
Hello, my name is Dr. John Botting. I am a deputy principal at Osaka Prefectural Suito Kokusai Junior and Senior High School in Osaka, Japan. I am also an adjunct assistant professor at the Workland School of Education at the University of Calgary in Canada. In this teacher training video, we will introduce you to the International Baccalaureate Primary Years Program.IBPYP. We will start with a school tour. Then we will sit down with Principal Dwayne Primo, and he will further explain some of the core concepts of the PYP. After this, I will give a mini lecture about current international standards for education. The training video finishes with some key questions for educators in Japan to consider.Let's get started.
This is a school where we really put the students at the center of teaching and learning. You can see this mural was done by the students at the school. Everything we do is we try to take ownership. It's not going to be perfect. There may be some spelling errors on the posters, but this is all student-led and done by the students. This whole mural was a project with the PYP coordinator, having the kids come in and draw. We really like to do a lot of ownership in this school, and we're okay with things not being perfect. I think that's the biggest part of that, and the difference between the Japanese system is we want bulletin boards, because you know what? Your school is your other teacher. So we talk about the classroom is the third teacher.So if you don't have a classroom that engages the students, you're losing out. So students also want to see what they've done. They're proud about it. You can see this. These are the learner profile posters, and these were done by the students. And the students look at these and they're like, wow, look, my friend did this. Or they want to share about their learning with the other students in the classroom.As you can see in this classroom, the boards take ownership. Student works all over the place. Student projects done by students. Once again, student work, trying to really give ownership of what's happening. Everything that's done in the school, it should be done by the students. So the old saying is,Don't work harder than your students. Make your students work. It's their job to learn how to teach themselves. Students take ownership. Yeah, it's not perfect, but the students have organized their own learning resources. That's something to really think about. Taking more time on figuring out who your students are, and less time about making everything perfect. And once again, lots of student work, all done by students.Younger grades, older grades, everybody gets an opportunity to share what they're doing. Allowing the students to actually choose what they want. All of these murals were done by the students as their way to show that we do not support bullying in the school. Areas that allow students to play.So the IB philosophy is really focused on the student. And so what that means is you try to put the student at the center of all teaching and learning. So that means that everything you do should be student-oriented. So instead of standing at the front of the class and teaching something like war and conflict, you would go to the students,put a piece of paper down on the table, put them in groups, and you would say, hey, let's write down what we know about war and conflict.
And the reason we do this is we want to find out where the students are. Sometimes they already know about war and conflict, and then you want to start learning or teaching from that point. I think the big difference in the Japanese system is it's a list of content, and you teach to the students even if they already know it. And I think that's one of the biggest parts of one of the better parts of being in an IB school. It's called a constructivist approach. It's about really figuring out where the students are and helping them engage in their own learning. I think the biggest change in the thinking is you want to get the students to do most of the work. It's not the teacher teaching the kids. It's the teacher coaching the kids and setting up learning opportunities. The IB is focused on skills. And the reason it does that is the world is changing. We know with AI, a lot of the jobs that were traditionally done for knowledge workers can now be done by AI. And the knowledge base in the world is changing very quickly. So what the IB does is teaches the kids, instead of memorizing, they teach them how to find that knowledge. It's about having the students think about what is the most efficient way to learn. And as every child has a different brain, every child can think of different ways to learn. I think the biggest challenge for teachers is they feel responsible for all the teaching and learning in class. You need to be able to say, hey, the teaching and learning is the student's job. And the teacher's job is to set up provocations or lessons to help those students teach each other and learn. So letting go of control, the best way to do that is start with a little task. You're teaching the kids about maybe war and conflict. You start off with having them sort words. You don't have the categories. They get to pick the categories. And then slowly keep giving more control to the students. And then you will feel comfortable. I know it's challenging, but I guess the biggest part is also making sure that you're working with the parents so they understand that it's not the teacher's role to only give information. It's the teacher's role to teach the students how to teach themselves. It's student-centered. And that means that the student's a big part of it. And so the school expects the student to take ownership for their learning, but they also expect for the parents to take ownership of their learning. So that means we want parents to come in and talk about how things are going. It really does take a community to grow a child, and in the IB, it's not just the school raising the child. The IB or an IB school will ask a parent to come in and give feedback. All of the parents that have come in have worked with us, and we have a lot of information sessions, and they learn that, okay, this system is good, and my Japanese system is good. I think they can work together. And that's one of the biggest things the IB has brought in. They're not saying that memorization is bad. They're just saying only memorization is not optimal for teaching the students. I think the biggest question people ask me is, where are the tests? Where are the scores? Parents have a challenge with this because they're used to students doing a test and then moving on. However, in the IB system, we give formative feedback. That means lots of little quizzes, but they don't go on to the report card. At the end of the entire unit, the students will do a summative task, and that mark will go on to the report card. I think that takes a lot of a mindset change for parents, because there's not a test every couple weeks, and it's not just memorizing for that test. I think one of the best ways to move from a traditional education to a more progressive education is to really think about what you're doing. So, as teachers in the Ontario system, in the Japanese system, I do understand you have a list of standards that you have to cover. My suggestion is you take all of those standards, you put them into a bucket, and you try and, what is that big concept around them? And once you have that big concept, then you start to produce smaller tasks in the school to help teach the kids. So for example, if we need to teach the kids about the Civil War period in Japan, we may start off with having the kids look at different civil wars around the world and trying to think about what are the big concepts that cause that. So for example, most of the time it's resource, power allocation, immigration. All of these things are big concepts. And really thinking about that big concept ahead of time will help you think about moving towards that progressive education. It's a journey. You're not going to do it all in one day, but starting slowly is very important. My advice for a leadership team is to think about a developmental mindset. And what that means is every teacher is different. Some of them will take on new tasks and open up their mind earlier. Some teachers will take much longer. I think it's about setting up systems where they feel safe. For example, in our school, what we do is we do peer-to-peer observations. And the administration is not part of that. We have one teacher go into another teacher's classroom and they talk about how the lesson went. And if you have two teachers that are both very fixed in their mindset, as a leadership team, you could give them a checklist. And they would talk about that checklist without anybody present. And after about 2 or 3 of these meetings, you would bring your administrator into that conversation where they would talk about it. This way, the teachers have developed this psychological safety and they feel comfortable to be a risk taker. I think the biggest part to becoming an IB school or a more progressive school is to start with your leadership and philosophy, your mission, vision, and philosophy. Are you ready to take on the philosophy of giving ownership to the kids? Does it fit the context of your school? So for example, if you're running a Juken program, you're going to have to change a lot of things about your program to fit with the IB framework. That being said, you don't have to always be just in the IB framework. You could think, this is the IB framework, this is us, how do we move over here? So the biggest piece of advice I can give you is don't plan 1 year, plan 2 years. If you plan 2 years, plan 3 years. Having people change and feel safe with the change takes time. But you also need to have your leadership on board, and they need to understand the mission and the vision of the IB or progressive education. Otherwise, none of this works.
Children are people. Each child is special to someone. When a parent or guardian sends their child to school in the morning, they do so with the expectation that their child will be treated fairly and with dignity and kindness. Under the principles of equality and human rights, each child deserves to be safe and happy, to learn and grow. Each child has his or her own level. Every child should succeed by growing to higher levels from where they were. Helping every child succeed according to his or her level is an approach that contrasts with standardization, where every child is expected to meet criteria, irrespective of what the child's level is. It should not be the situation where education is a competition and only the students who can get good grades inside of a teacher-centered system can succeed. Yes, children should be challenged. And yes, there are some things in this world that children should learn and master while they are in school. But at the same time, absolutely every child should succeed in relation to where he or she started. So many children suffer under the competition that goes with standardization. Many children learn to feel inadequate and develop negative self-image. The other day, a parent told me about a time in elementary school when she was discouraged from asking questions by her teacher. Questions are the heart of learning. A good question shows more about intelligence than a good answer. About the questions, what is an education system? What purpose does it serve? I won't answer those questions in this short video. Instead, I ask you to think about countries around the world that do not have robust education systems that prioritize equality, human rights, intelligent curriculum content, or quality of teacher training. Can you think of countries like that? How well are those countries doing? Are their citizens treated fairly? Are the countries doing well economically? Education is the single greatest tool that a nation has to ensure the welfare of the nation. Now we have much greater equality, recognition of human rights. In fact, in Japan, education up to the end of junior high school is mandatory. This is called universal education. There was a time when universal education was a radical idea. Now we take it for granted as a normal thing. In the past, it was also common for the academic content and quality of education to be highly variable from region to region. There was no common curriculum and there were no national standards for teacher training. That has changed. Today, systems exist to better ensure the quality of education across the nation. Similar to other countries, Japan has, over time, developed an education system where all members of society have the right to education and where standards for educational quality exist. Those are very good things. Much about the education system that exists today was developed before taking into account educational research and human learning. In the beginning, a factory model was the basis for thinking about the modern education system. If you want to know more about this, I recommend you look into the term Carnegie Unit. By the way, the Carnegie Unit is no longer considered a good thing, even by the group that made it. But it is still widely used, especially in Japan. I will fast forward to the present day when many decades of educational research is finally starting to be valued in large school systems. Today we want children to learn well. We want children to grow as happy, confident people who are well socialized. We want children to be able to continue learning throughout their lives. We want children to be individually knowledgeable and competent, but also able to work well in teams. We want children to develop the courage and creativity to address the challenges of the future, and also to be clever enough to take advantage of interesting opportunities. From brain science, we know that learning and emotions are linked. Positive emotions play a crucial role in learning by enhancing memory, attention, and motivation. This involves brain structures such as the amygdala and hippocampus. It involves neurotransmitters like dopamine, the happy hormone. On the other hand, negative emotions restrict the brain's higher order thinking functions, impairing memory encoding and problem-solving abilities. Chronic stress has been shown to increase disruptive hormones and reduce the volume of the hippocampus, negatively affecting memory and learning capabilities. In 2018, the OECD noted that Japanese students face significant mental health challenges, often stemming from academic pressures, societal expectations, and lack of adequate support for emotional well-being in schools. Research through the OECD's PISA studies shows that Japanese students report high levels of stress with substantial fear of failure and lower self-efficacy, which can negatively impact their mental health. According to the 2018 PISA survey, this fear is more pronounced in Japan than in many other OECD countries. In response, the OECD encouraged Japanese schools to focus on creating emotionally supportive environments and strengthening relationships between teachers and students. Evidence indicates that positive interactions with teachers can help students manage school-related stress, reducing anxiety, and promoting a healthier mindset. An education system that does not pay attention to the role of emotion in learning doesn't really know how to achieve its goal of graduating highly competent, motivated, well-adjusted students. In the beginning, it made sense that a large-scale education system would focus on things that made it possible to manage the whole system administratively, where the goals were universal education, standardized curriculum, and teacher training qualifications. This was a huge step forward, but the emphasis was more on administration than learning. The first manifestation of large-scale education took a viewpoint of schools as factories that would output children with specific types of knowledge and skills. Are those types of knowledge and skills still relevant today? This large-scale education also took an authoritarian approach for how to teach. It has been very top-down, emphasizing the obedience of students, which has also resulted in dependence and a lack of risk-taking. The topic, what is the best education system, requires intelligent consideration, sophisticated treatment, and balanced responses. But in general, we know when something is working and when it is not working. Parents especially know this. And students who have wide exposure to the world also know this. It is not easy to change a massive system. It takes time, resources, new vision, and diligence. Next, the Ministry of Education has outlined new ways for education in Japan that are consistent with the best international standards. Parents and their children are eager for a new era of education that matches the complexities of today and that honors children as people. Students are entitled to have good lives as young people while they are in school. They shouldn't have to suffer while they are young with the idea that their lives might be good someday. Their lives can be good now and always. And this can include hard work and challenges. Teachers also seem willing to learn and improve. The real change makers are school leaders. They have a tremendous impact on how people at the schools think and act. It's important for school leaders to implement MEC's new course of study, to have a vision for their schools, to support the growth of teachers, to include the voices of children and guardians in shaping the school, and to also put in place strategies and metrics for school improvement. All of the principles that I have mentioned are at the heart of international baccalaureate education. But the truth is that any school can realize these principles. And MEC has outlined many excellent principles and recommendations. How can Japan move forward? We can start by building schools around student-centered learning, with a focus on 21st century knowledge and skills. At the beginning of this video, we had a school tour and discussion from Principal Dwayne Primo. He gave good examples of what it looks like when administrators, teachers, students, and parents put student learning and student welfare at the center of their thinking and efforts. It is possible to build schools around the concept of student learning. Do you know what the difference between teacher-centered instruction and student-centered learning is? They are very different approaches. And that is the first thing to try to figure out. Large public schools might not be able to do student-centered learning in the same way that small private schools can. But we can try it. And in the process of trying, we can find a better way.